Hey everyone, it's Hunter here with 360 LSAT Tutoring, and today we're talking to Kieran, and we're interviewing her about her LSAT journey and the tips that she has for people studying for the LSAT. So without further ado, let's hop right into the interview. Okay, I'm here with Kieran, and she received a 171 on her LSAT, and congrats on the score, by the way, that's awesome. So I'll just go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so like you said, my name's Kieran. I'm going to be attending UIUC the next fall. I graduated from Indiana University in 2019, and since then I've been working in South Korea as an English teacher just because I was wanting to like travel the world a bit, and obviously Corona put a little bit of a damper in that, but I am now going to be going back for law school. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's your reason for going to law school? What are you looking to do after you finish law school?
Yeah, so I decided to go. I had already kind of been interested in studying law when I entered undergrad, and I took some like pre-law classes in undergrad, which I know isn't exactly representative of like what I'm going to be studying and doing later on, but I was always really interested in those courses. And then when I moved here, I like really wanted to like focus on figuring out what I wanted to do. So I did like a lot of like soul searching my first year here, and really it was just always law was what I came back to. And I talked with like some friends I'd known who'd worked in the field for a bit, and it was always something I really thought I'd be interested in doing. Yeah, that's why I decided to go to law
Yeah,
school now.
that's awesome. So you got a 171 on your official LSAT. I know you had mentioned that you didn't really take a diagnostic, but what was the test you got on the first test you ever took?
Yeah, so the first test I took was probably after like 2 weeks of studying, and that one was like a 159.
Okay, that's great. And how long did it take you to go from that 159 to your official 171 on the LSAT?
Yeah, so I studied for I think 4 months for the LSAT, but I do think I was a little unique because, like I said, I was an English teacher here when I was studying, and our schools were shut down for Corona, but I still had to go to work. So I think my timeline's probably a little bit different than most people's, just because like I was had 8 hours a day where I was stuck at a desk and had nothing to do except study for the LSAT. So my timeline was 4 months to go from the 159 to the 171, but I do think that maybe that probably wouldn't have happened had I had a full-time job.
Okay, yeah, well, that was kind of an interesting situation, no doubt, for sure. And you mentioned that you kind of were stuck at a desk there. What was your study schedule like when you were studying?
Yeah, so like I said, I did have like a full 8 hours a day that I could study, but I realized very quickly that that wasn't realistic. Like I was going to burn out really quickly if I was studying for 8 hours a day. I did try to do something else that related for every day, and I would say during that 4 months, pretty only on work days though, because I did have the full work day. I wasn't studying on weekends.
Mhm.
And until like I did have to start studying weekends closer to the test, just because my work did start back up closer to the test. But most of the time I tried to like do at least 1 or 2 sections a day, like at minimum. And then I tried to do a full practice test every day, every like weekday when I could, but that wasn't sustainable all the time. I do think it's like really easy to burn out if that's the way you're studying, even though it was the only thing I'm doing. Like doing full LSAT every day is not fun. And it gets really disheartening too when you don't see your scores going up, and it gets really hard to motivate yourself. But yeah, I'd say I was doing something 5 days a week pretty much for the LSAT.
Yeah, it does seem like I think when you first go into studying for the LSAT, if you have nothing else going on, you're like, oh, I'll just study 8 hours a day, it'll be easy. But
Yeah,
it's
no,
not
no
it's not the same.
problem.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same as like working a job because your mind is constantly going for that eight
Yeah,
hours if you're studying for eight
it's
hours.
way
So
harder than I thought it was going to be.
yeah, I actually had the same experience. I was like, oh, I'll just study whatever, 7 or 8 hours a day and I'll be fine. And then it's fine for the first week or two, and then you start getting in and you're like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. So yeah, definitely. What was your goal score when you started, and then did it change along the way?
Yeah, so my GPA isn't like I have like a 3.3, which isn't like a horrific GPA, but it's definitely not like a top 14 like GPA typically would be. So honestly, my like I didn't really have like a goal score. It was just I want it above 170, but I didn't have like a specific number there that I was shooting for. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I could get as high of an LSAT score as possible, just because I really didn't want to have to pay ticket price to go to school.
Yeah,
And LSAT was the only way I was going to manage that.
yeah, and you bring up a good point there. Even if your goal isn't necessarily to go to the top 14, getting an LSAT score that's high, it gives you a lot of other advantages like money, right? So you end up not having to pay as much out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So what like the weeks leading up to your LSAT, what were you taking practice tests at? Like what was the score that you were averaging leading up to your LSAT?
So I'll say like I told you, the first score I ever got was a 159, and then I think I took my next full practice test like because I had been studying for a week or two when I got the 159, but not very like consistently.
Mhm.
And then I did like a full week or two of consistent studying, and I think my next one was a 165. And then I kind of plateaued around like the high 160s for a while, which is like part of the reason I said it did get really disheartening because I wasn't improving for a bit.
Mhm.
And then I think near the test date, like probably within like 2 months of the test, I was pretty consistently getting like 170s somewhere in there. I think I usually was averaging before the test anywhere from 170 to 175.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had plateaued for a little while. Do you have any advice for people that have plateaued or are feeling like they've plateaued?
Yeah, here's something. One of the things that helped me is I was trying to like budget myself as much as I could on my LSAT study materials, but I did go ahead and pay for 1 month of Seven Sage. I think that's what it's called.
Yep.
And I did that just because like they do tell you like what type of questions you're missing. And even though like I only paid for 1 month, I didn't keep paying for it. Like that alone did help me like just like really focus in on what I was missing. But also just I think like I said, like I was doing an LSAT like at least 2 LSAT sections pretty much every day, except the few breaks I did take. So I think like really just kind of repetition also helped.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think part of it is just like like taking as many tests as you can, take as many sections as you can. You almost grind through it for sure. Yeah, you kind of mentioned the materials that you use. You said Seven Sage. Did you use any other study materials, any books or any
Yeah. So the
online
first thing I
services?
did when I started studying was I read every single logic Bible like cover to cover. I'm not sure that's the best use of your time, to be honest, but I did do that just to start studying because I had them and it was a way that I knew to like work at that point. And then once I was done with the LSAT Bibles, I paid for the year access to like the practice test on LSAT.
Yep.
And I was just doing sections from there every day. And I tried to do the full test. I did all my full tests I saved for like I think like 70 to like all the more recent tests were the full test I did, and then I did sections from older tests just to save the more recent tests to be my like full exams that I could take.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good strategy as far as you want to save the full tests, the more recent ones, to take your actual tests, and then your sections or any studying stuff you want to take from the earlier ones. I think that's definitely a good idea. Um, as far as general advice goes, on any of the section, logical reasoning, logic games, reading, did you have anything that really helped you, that helped you score well or increase your confidence or anything like that on any of those sections?
Yeah. So for me, I had the most trouble on the reading section. I think personally, honestly, I think if you want to just get your score up and if you want to do it quickly, like logic games is the easiest way to go about it. Like I got really, really, really good at logic games in like a couple of weeks just from doing them consistently. And that was something that I could like just from a couple of weeks of doing it consistently, I could get like a perfect score and finish the section in like 15 minutes. And then other like reasoning, I think like I said, you really need to like figure out what type of questions you're missing, and go from there and try to like because they do like backload the harder questions. So I'd say like don't waste too much time early on in the section. Like you can always go back if you have time later. But if you waste time on the easier questions in the beginning, you're not going to have time for the harder ones later on. And then reading comprehension, honestly, what always helped me was like taking the test on paper, but that wasn't an option for me because I took the test during like the LSAT Flex one. So I would say like for that, I mean, you need to practice as much as you can and however you're taking it, you need to practice that way because I mean, it didn't matter to me that I could get a perfect score on the reading section because I didn't take on paper because I didn't take the test on paper when I took it. So there's no point in practicing in a method or the way that you're not going to take the exam.
Yeah, that's actually a great point that practice the way you're actually going to take the test because there are minute differences. It may not feel like it at the time, but reading on a computer is a lot different than reading on a piece of paper and being able to like
way different.
Yeah, being able to like highlight and stuff on a on a piece
they
of
do
paper.
have the highlighting like features there, but like I said, for me personally, just paper works so much better because on the like the software, you have to like flip through the reading, like you have to scroll through it, versus on the paper, like I can physically remember where the section that I'm looking for is, and I don't have to scroll. I can
Yeah.
so I was able to do it so much faster. I am kind of, I wish I had gotten to take the test on paper, because I do feel like I could have done better had I gotten to take it on paper, but you know, it is what it is. I'm still going to college, so I'm not, not too upset about it.
I would say 171 is a pretty good score. So yeah. As far as interesting takes on the LSAT, either specifically about sections or maybe a more general take on the LSAT, do you have anything that maybe advice that maybe not everyone would agree with, or something that's unique to you?
Yeah. I think honestly, like what I tell people in my life that I know that are preparing for the LSAT is like, I think especially if you do have a full-time job while you're preparing for the LSAT, like you probably do need to give your, and if your goal is a 170 plus, like if you want to get like mid 170s or even higher than that, you need to give yourself a lot of time to prepare for it, because you're going to burn out. Like even with me, like I said, like I didn't have a job like for 3 of the 4 months I was applying for, or preparing for the LSAT, and I still burned out, because it's really, it does get really hard when you're like studying every single day and you're still getting 170. Like even if it's a 170, like you're not improving every single, like all, like even though you're studying all the time. So I think it's just like, be kind to yourself and give yourself a lot of time. Don't start studying like 2 months before the test if you want to get it, if you're aiming for a high score. Like it's just way too much stress to worry about, and being like in a good mental space and feeling confident on the day is way more important than like it's important enough that you should start studying earlier than you think.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I always give is, if you're able to, I know not everyone's able to, but if you're able to, give yourself like way more time than you think you'll need.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think you need 4 months, like that's fine, but you're probably going to want a couple weeks break in there at some point, like just
yeah.
like your week or two off here and there, because it really is emotionally and mentally draining.
Yeah, yep, exactly. You're gonna want breaks. And not having the pressure of, oh, I have to study because I have the test coming up, right? Like right away, and I'm not at my goal score yet. Not having that pressure is really does a lot for your mental state.
And honestly, taking breaks, like I always found I got a better score just taking a week off sometimes, because I wasn't so stressed about it and I wasn't in my head as much when I was taking the test.
Yeah, certainly. If you get away from the LSAT for a little while, you kind of are shocked when you come back and your score is the same or maybe improved, like you said. Just getting away from it can really help. Can give you a new perspective too on things you like hadn't thought about before, for sure. Okay, the next question I have is what would you say is a realistic time frame to go from a 150 to a 170? I know that there's no right answer to this. It's a question that I get a lot. What would you say is a reasonable amount of time to do that?
Yeah, I personally think, like I said, it depends a lot on the amount of time that you have to give it, like in a day-to-day basis. I did it in like, I think I got my first 170 like only after like 2.5 months of studying, but I was able to dedicate a lot of time to it in that 2.5 months. And also, like, just because I got my first 170 doesn't mean I would have gotten a 170 on test day at that point.
Yep.
So I think like if you need a 170, like if that's how you're going to be able to afford college and that's what you have to get, like I'd give yourself like maybe 6+ months. Like honestly, if you want like a mid 170, like maybe even a full year. It's really hard to consistently get to that level. For some people it's easier, like I'm not saying it's not, but you will probably plateau at some point too. Like it's really, you're probably going to shoot up like a lot once you start studying and then plateau for a while. And you need time to like work through that, I think. And I don't think 4 months is enough for like the normal person who's not going to have 8 hours a day to give to it. It wouldn't have been enough for me. Like, anyway, I was in a very unique situation.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take too, and something that I want to mention is, I think for me it took as long for me to get to a 170 as it took to get to from a 170 to a 175. So it's not always, the same on your way up, right? You may go from a 150 to a 160 real quick and then slow down from 160 to 165. And I definitely noticed that. I think, my way from a 150 to a 170, it only took so long, but then I wanted to go higher, and that took just as long to get consistently scoring in that 177-ish range as it did.
So I got my first 170 like after maybe 2 months somewhere in there studying, and I like I think I got like in the next 2 months I got like a couple 175s, and it was mainly in like the 172-ish area. I thought for sure I've got 2 more months to study. I got a 170 now. I'm going to be getting like a 178 on test day, and that did not happen.
Yeah. And the other thing is when you hit that first 170 on a practice set, it's a great feeling, but it doesn't mean that you're going to do that every time. That's for sure. I mean, your test scores go up and down. I know the first time I ever hit a 170 on a practice test, the next test I took, it was like 2 days later, I think I got like a 165. So just because you hit it the one time doesn't mean you're going to consistently hit it, and you have to kind of keep that work going through there.
No, I think like a month before test day, I retested at like a 167 or something like that after months of testing in the high 170 or mid 170s, just because I think I was too stressed, and that's why I took time off.
Yeah.
So definitely give yourself to take time off.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah, giving yourself that time, time to take off is really important for sure. Did you have any pre-test routine, either, a strict pre-test routine or something that you did a lot of times before you would take practice tests?
Yeah, so when I was doing 7 Sage, I would kind of follow their routine of like you take the test and then you do the blind review. But when I was taking the practice test on the like LSAT website, they really don't give you that option because they just immediately show you which questions you got wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell you the answers as well. So with those, honestly, what I would do sometimes is I would just give myself like, I would finish the section within the 25, or it's been a long time. It's been like a year since I've taken an LSAT now. I'm like, is it 25 minutes?
35. 35.
Finish the section in the normal amount of time. Yeah. And then after I finished the section, I would like don't end the timer and like go back through all the questions and doing the blind review, so that way I could like not have the LSAT. Because I do think 7 Sage is worth to pay for a month or so, but if you are trying to budget like and not spend, because you can spend like 500, 600, even more than that studying for the LSAT if you don't watch it. So if you don't want to do that, I do think it's worth it for like a month just to get those diagnostics and practice with blind review. But after that, you're going to have to find ways to do that sort of thing without paying more. And I think LSAC just like set the timer. So that's usually what I would do. Although you do have to be careful with that and make sure you're not giving yourself extra time just because you think you need it, because you're not going to get that on test day either.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. Is kind of what we talked about earlier about you want to study how it's actually going to be on the test day. So it's easy to give yourself you're like, oh, I'll just give myself an extra minute, but you aren't going to get that minute. So yeah, you want to practice how you're actually going to do the test.
And also I think sometimes when I didn't score as well, like if I did poorly on a section, sometimes I would give myself like a day before I came back to it, just so I wouldn't be like, because if I did poorly on a section, I would be upset about it, and I didn't want to go over it at that moment because I wouldn't be able to like clearly look at the answers without maybe being like mad at myself over it, and it's not worth it in the moment, at least.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, is avoiding frustration is a lot of the LSAT, because it's so easy to get frustrated. So if you know yourself and I would do the same thing. If I did poorly on a test or something, I wouldn't go over it right away because I know I would just kind of get mad at myself and get frustrated. And I mean, that's just not productive. So
it's an incredibly frustrating process. Like studying for the LSAT is not fun, and you should give yourself time. Don't get too upset about it. Lots and lots of people. Most people who get 180s did not get 180s overnight.
Yeah.
I'm sure they had lots and lots of 160 somethings along the way. Yep,
for sure. That's actually a great point too, is like, I think it seems like from the outside when I first started studying, someone that's scoring in the 170s or high 170s or something, it looks like, oh, it's always been easy for them. And certainly there are a few people that's true for, but I would say the vast majority of people, they were in the same spot as someone that's struggling now. So they've been through it, and they kind of live to tell the tale, I guess you could say. Okay, finishing up here, second to last question. Was there anything that you switched from doing that really made a difference in your score, like that you could see immediately? Like one day you were taking the test one way, and the next you decided to do something differently, and you saw an immediate jump, maybe in your score or maybe just in your ability?
I'm trying to think if there was like a method I checked. The one thing that I know made a difference was taking the reading section on paper, but that doesn't really, it's not good. Like I said, that doesn't matter to me in the long run because I couldn't take it on paper. I'm trying to think if there was any testing strategies I used. I think like not particularly really. I think I always really just tried to get through the sections. Like I always tried to do a first round as quickly as I could, and I do think that really helped because that always gave me time to go back through to a lot of questions. I say if you're really struggling with a question, like always just like leave it and come back because there's like you have to get through all of them. If you don't have time, like that's way worse than not leaving one or two blank if you didn't have time to get to them. But yeah, no, not really. I think the only major jumps I saw were changing to paper, which didn't help, and then also just getting really good at logic games because they're so easy to get really good at, and then you can get a really good score.
Yeah, I think that's
getting one or two wrong on that, it's already like a 160 most of the time.
Yeah, I think like if you really want to just see an improvement in your score, if you need that confidence, it can be good to work on logic games. Because
I don't really get how they think logic games is something you don't need to study for, because logic games are the one thing that like you can get a massive jump just from a couple weeks of studying.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last question here is if you could give like one piece of advice to someone that is studying for the LSAT, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say, figure out like kind of what your goals are, what you'd be comfortable with going to. And what score you're going to need to like realistically be able to afford that score. Because like I said, the main reason I was studying for the LSAT like I did was to afford the school I was going to, be able to go to eventually. And then I'd say just like also be realistic with yourself if that's going to happen, because you don't want like to give yourself like a severe mental illness for an LSAT. It's not the end of the world at the end of the day. So just stay calm and give yourself plenty of time. That's the number one piece of advice, because if you have time, then you have time to take breaks, and you have time to not be as stressed about it.
Perfect. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you too.
Thank you.